All right. So last time we described completely explicitly the homotopy category of a model category, right? So we proved that this homotopy category was equivalent to this quotient pi CCF, whose objects are objects that are at the same time fibrant and cofibrant, and whose morphism are simply the morphism between A and X modeled out by this homotopy relation, right? And the key ingredient in this whole thing, as we saw last time, was the Whitehead theorem. And as a corollary, we have also an explicit description of the morphism set in the homotopy category, in which we consider objects that are not necessarily fibrant or cofibrant. So we just take, okay, there is parenthesis missing. So we take a cofibrant resolution of A and the fibrant resolution of X. Then we take the Hom set between the two, and then we mod out by the homotopy relation. So as you can see, this is a much simpler description than, for example, the path category, in which you have zigzags of maps, in which wrong way maps are weak equivalencies. And also, as a nice corollary, we prove that if F is an isomorphism in the homotopy category, then it was a weak equivalence to begin with, which is, well, for example, topological spaces, it's completely obvious. Well, not so obvious, but more or less. Well, here it's a theorem, right? All right. So any questions about what we did last time before we start with today's lecture?
Excusez-moi.
Oui.
J'ai une petite question.
Oui.
Est-ce que vous avez parlé d'une catégorie de modèles dans TOP où les équivalences faibles, en fait, c'est les équivalences fortes d'homotopie?
Yeah, so
Oui.
yeah, so I talked
And
about it in the, I think in the first lecture I gave this example. Let me.
maybe the second one, but
Sorry?
I think it's the second one, but anyway. And my question is, what do you mean the weighted theorem in that case?
Oh, so Whitehead theorem in that case is not so
Trivial?
interesting, because by definition, well, there is still some little bit of content, right? So this was this example, the strong model structure. There is still some content, because you have to prove that homotopy in the sense, in the traditional sense, is the same as homotopy in the sense of model categories, right? Which is not necessarily obvious, right? But once you have done that, yeah, the Whitehead theorem is obvious in this model category. It's not an interesting theorem for this model category. Yeah.
And so, what's the point with this example of model category?
It depends on your applications. I mean, well, one thing that it has the merit of doing is existing, I guess. Prove that you can have many different model structures on model categories. Well, one advantage also is that it allows one to deal with this mixed model structure, which has more applications, because you can see here the weak equivalencies are the weak equivalencies of Quillen, so traditional weak homotopy equivalencies, but the fibrations are the fibrations of Strum, right? So then you have this description of cofibration, and this mixed model structure has a lot more applications than I guess Strum's model structure. Right, so, and proving that this is a model category then allows you to use the theorem of Cole, which I'm not going to talk about much, but basically it's a way of combining two model structures, but has some compatibility. For example, you need to have the fact that this W needs to be included in this W, which is the case. And also you need to have the fact that these fibrations have to be included in these fibrations, right? And this is also the case. Serre fibrations are oh no, this is the other one, right? their vibrations are Hurowitz vibration, but the reverse is not true. Right, so you have these two inclusions, and as a corollary, this is included in this, right? And then you can apply Cole's theorem and prove that this is a model structure. Right. All right, so is this satisfying answer to your question?
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Merci.
All right, any other questions before we start today's content? All right, so the goal for today is to prove that the category of chain complexes with respect with the projective structure is actually a model category, all right? Because so far, well, we have done a lot of abstract stuff about model categories, but we haven't actually proved that something non-trivial was model category, right? We had these three trivial examples where weak equivalences were either all maps or just isomorphisms. These are not really interesting examples. Now we are actually going to have an actual example of a non-trivial model category. And we are going to use a technique which is called the small object argument that we can also use to prove that topological spaces with a equivalent structure, so the one where weak equivalences are weak homotopy equivalences, is also a model category. We are not going to do it, but I'm going to state a theorem at the end that you can use to prove yourself that top is a model category. All right. So as you are going to see, there are 5 axioms for model categories, and they are roughly speaking in order of difficulty, right? MC1, MC2, MC3 are more or less easy to prove. MC4 needs a little bit of work for chain complexes, but it's still okay. It's just some basic diagram chase. You don't really need to get heavy machinery to do it. But then you have this axiom MC5, which is the factorization axiom. And this one is, it takes a lot more work. And this is the one for which we are going to use this small object argument, which is something very classical in model category theory. All right. So just as a reminder, so that everyone is on the same page, so R is some commutative ring. I don't need any other properties about this ring, could be anything. CH, so we only look at non-negatively graded chain complexes. If you have unbounded chain complexes, things get a lot more complicated. You are going to see that we use the boundedness several times in the proof. Basically, it starts as some kind of induction step, right? We start at 0 and then we go up. If we have nowhere to start, things become more difficult, right? So objects are chain complexes. So you have maps like this, where you end at C0 and you have a differential, and D circle D is 0, and morphisms are just chain maps, like maps that make the obvious diagram commute. All right, and just for notation, I define the cycles. So ZK of C will simply be the kernel of CK to CK minus 1 of the differential. So for K at least 1, and I define just Z0 as C0. All right, so these are the cycles. You have the boundaries. This is just notation, right? BK of C is the image of CK plus 1 into CK. So for all K at least 0. And then you have homology, of course. HK of C is simply ZK mod BK. All right, and my convention is such that ZK and BK are subsets of CK, right? And also some terminology. I will say that C is acyclic if HKC equals 0 for all K. All right, so this is a word I'm going to use a lot. All right, and just to remind you, P in R mod is projective if, well, I'm going to summarize it by a diagram like this. Whenever you have a map into some R module and surjection into this R module, then you can lift this map. All right. So are these okay for everyone? All right, pretty basic homological algebra definitions, but just to fix some terminology. All right, so now we are going to define our model structure. So just to remind you, the theorem will be as follows. Like this, a model structure on CH greater or equal to 0, where, all right, so weak equivalencies are quasi-isomorphisms. So it means that HK of F is an iso for all K. All right, so let me just be sure. Cofibrations are chain maps. Sorry, I should say injective chain maps F from C star to D star, such that dk mod F of CK is projective all K. So I will summarize it as, so for all K at least 0, right? I will summarize it as injective maps with projective co-kernel, right? This is co-kernel of K. And finally, fibrations are chain maps which are surjective in degree at least 1, right? So don't be confused. Fibration does not have to be surjective in degree 0. All right, so this is the theorem we are going to prove today. That these classes of maps, of morphisms, satisfy all the axioms of a models category. All right. So any questions before we begin? So as a first lemma, starting from now, I will write just CH0 greater than 0 R. Implicitly, I will consider these classes of maps, all right? But of course, as you know, there can exist many model structures, but from now on, this is the model structure I'm considering. And so I will just write CH greater than 0 R satisfies such and such axiom. So for example, I will write this property. MC1, MC2, and MC3, right? But of course, I'm just talking about this model structure, right? This is not a property of the category itself, except MC1. This is a property of these classes of maps. All right, so the proof. So MC1, which is that the category is complete and co-complete. Well, this is classical. So R mod is complete and co-complete. I'm not going to prove it, and limits and co-limits are defined degree-wise in CH greater than 0 of R. Which is to say that, for example, if you have some diagram and you want to compute it, what it is in degree n, well, this is simply the co-limit of, well, okay, the notation is is not amazing. Let me write it maybe this way. All right, well, I hope this is clear for everyone. For example, you want to compute the coproduct of two chain complexes. Well, you just compute the coproduct in each degree, and you have obvious maps induced for the differentials, and well, basically everything works, right? So this is a really classical statement that I guess you saw in Emmanuel Wagner's course, right? MC2 is clear too. More generally, clear for any class W defined as f-1 of isos, where f from C to D is some functor. All right, because MC2, as you remember, is this 2 out of 3 property. So let's say you have some triangle like this, and 2 of the sides of the triangles are weak equivalencies, so quasi-isos. Let's say you have F, G, and G circle F. Well, what you can do is apply the HK functor to it. So you have HKF, HKG, and HKG circle F, which is, because this is a functor, HKG circle HKF, all right? And now, if two sides of this triangle are quasi-isos, then two sides of these triangles are actual isomorphisms. And isomorphism satisfies the 2 out of 3 property. This is obvious. And therefore, let's say, for example, these two are isos, then their composition is also an iso. And therefore, by definition, this is a quasi-iso. All right? Is this okay for everyone? All right, so as you can see, these are two very simple statements to prove. MC3 is a tiny little bit more work. It follows from the fact that, so MC3, let me recall, is that W, F, and C are closed under retract. And this follows from the fact that surjections, or I should say, epimorphisms, monomorphisms, and isomorphisms are closed under retracts, and any retract of a projective R module is projective. All right, so this is again this is a completely general statement in any category. If you have a monomorphism, so an injection, and you have a retract of it, then it is still a monomorphism. Let me sketch a proof. So for example, let's say you have A, B, A, X, Y, X, G, F. So for example, assume G is monomorphism, which in our modules are precisely injections. So it means that, right, and I should say this is the identity and this is the identity, all right. So it means that whenever you have two maps like this, if they agree when you compose them with G, so let's say you have alpha and beta, if alpha circle G equals beta circle G, then alpha equals beta. And now assume that you have two maps out of X, alpha, beta, gamma, and delta. If gamma circle F is equal to delta circle F, then you can compose it with this map. Let's call it, I don't know, R. So it means that gamma circle F circle R is equal to delta circle F circle R. But F circle R is rho, right? Another morphism. Circle G. It means that gamma circle rho circle G is equal to delta circle rho circle G. But G is a monomorphism, so you can deduce that gamma circle rho is equal to delta circle rho. But then you have, and this is almost the end, iota here. So you can compose with iota again, gamma circle rho circle iota is equal to delta circle rho circle iota. But rho circle iota is the identity. And so finally, you can deduce that gamma is equal to delta. All right, so exercise, prove that the same is true for epimorphisms, obviously. You just have to do it for the dual category. All right, so there is a question in the chat. It's not the inverse for monomorphism. Oh, yes, sorry. What I prove is that you have epimorphism. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, you have to think like G is kind of like surjective. So if alpha and beta agree on its image, then they agree on everything. Okay, for isomorphisms, you also have a proof, which is not too hard. You can just define the inverse by hand. And proving that the retract of a projective module is projective is also a small exercise. Let me sketch it also. Let's say that you have a projective module here, and you have a retract. And you want to prove that this one is projective, so you get some map like this. A. So let's say you want to lift it like this. Well, because P is surjective, you can lift here, and then you can compose with this map to get some map here. And because this is the identity, this triangle will commute. All right, I'm doing it very quickly. You can do it at home. And using all of this, you prove that the retract of either a weak equivalence or fibration or cofibrations is still a weak equivalence, a cofibration or a fibration. All right, is this okay for everyone? Questions? Okay. So far we haven't done much, right? The first three axioms are pretty simple, And this is, well, I'm not going to say that it is always going to be the case, because I'm sure you can imagine some model categories in which these axioms are insane. But for traditional model categories, these three axioms are quite simple. Now we are going to prove MC4, which is the axiom that you have lifting properties. So either that acyclic cofibrations lift against fibrations, or that cofibrations lift against acyclic fibrations. So this is a new lemma. And now we are going to use the actual properties of our category, right? So far we have only used like general statements, categorical statements. One could say even abstract nonsense. Now we are actually going to well, get our hands dirty and do something. So CHR satisfies MC4(1), which is the fact that whenever you have a cofibration here and a weak and an acyclic fibration here and a square like that, then there exists a lift.
Excuse-moi.
Oui.
Qu'est-ce que ça veut dire que les projectifs sont stables par rétract? Ah, rétract. Ah oui, en ligne, pas les. Ok.
Oui, oui.
Oui, non, j'avais raté un truc. Et puis, autre question, comment on voit que ce qu'on veut, c'est-à-dire nous, MC3 dans la catégorie des chaînes positives, ça découle uniquement du fait que épimorphisme, monomorphisme, de ce que vous avez dit, quoi.
Oh, okay. So the question is, how do we deduce from this that MC3 is true? Well, I can briefly sketch it. So let's say now that you have some, let me give an example. For example, let us prove that fibrations are stable under retract. So let's say that you have a diagram of chain complexes like this. Which is a retract. So this is the identity, this is the identity. And assume that this is a fibration, for example. Well, what is a fibration? It means that GK is epi. Yeah, this is the adjective that goes with epimorphism. It's epic. So GK is epic for all K at least 1. So basically, you take this diagram and you take it at degree K. And this gives you a diagram of R modules. And it tells you that Fk is a retract of GK. And therefore, using what we just proved, Fk is epic for all K at least 1. Right? So this gives you the proof for fibrations. For quasi-iso, so weak equivalencies, you just apply the homology functor, right? So, and you apply the fact that isomorphisms are closed under retracts. And finally, for cofibrations, you do what I did here, but you replace epic with monic. And you had a little bit more. You just add the fact that when you have maps like this and you take their cokernels, well, you have a well-defined map like this, by definition of a cokernel. Basically, you can view it as the fact that cokernel is some kind of functoriality, I don't know. And this is a retract. So if this cokernel is a projective module in each degree, then this is a projective in each degree, right? But
okay, merci beaucoup.
Right. All right. Any other questions before we start MC4? Because it's going to be a bit complicated, right? So make sure you are focused on this. All right. So let me start. Well, the proof is not very well. There is some intuition behind it, but it's a lot of diagram chasing, right? So I'm just going to present to you the completed proof. Of course, if you want to do it yourself, you don't expect to be able to find the proof like this, right? You have to, I don't know, work with diagrams for some time to do it. All right, so let's assume that you have a square like this, where this is a cofibration, which is to say it's injective in each degree and the co-kernel is projective. And here, this is an acyclic fibration. So it's surjective in positive degree and it's a quasi-iso. And our goal is to define some map L like this, some lift, right? So first of all, a very small fact, P is also surjective in degree 0. All right, a fibration in principle is only surjective in degree 1, but because this one is acyclic, it's also surjective in degree 0. Proof, so you can do this as some kind of lemma. Let y belong to y0, then the class of y is some homology class because it's automatically a cycle. So therefore, there exists some class X such that P star of X is the class of Y, which is to say that there exists some, I'm going a bit fast with the proof, let me know if you cannot follow. So there exists some Z such that P of X is Y plus DZ. All right, but Z is in degree 1, therefore there exists some, I don't know, alpha in X1 such that Z is P of alpha 1, because P is surjective in positive degree, because it's a fibration, and therefore Y is P of X minus D of alpha. All right? So you can keep this in your head. Whenever you have an acyclic fibration, it is also surjective in degree 0, right? Not just positive degree. And we are going to use this. All right. So more notation, just to have a clearer picture of what's going on. I will call the kernel here K. And I will call the co-kernel P. So the kernel, you know, it's just elements that get sent to 0. And the co-kernel is the quotient of B by A, right? And these are chain complexes. As I said, you can compute co-limits and limits degree-wise, so this includes kernels and co-kernels. All right. So our goal is to define this lift L. Okay, and we want to define it on B. And it's complicated. But we have some nice statement is the fact that P is projective. So we have, a short exact sequence like this by definition of kernel, co-kernel, blah, blah. 0 goes into AK, goes into BK, goes into PK, goes into 0. And because P is projective, there exists a section here. And as a corollary, BK is isomorphic to AK plus PK for all K. All right, as our module. This is, of course, not compatible with the differential in general, right? It may be clear. This is just a splitting of R modules. And so if we want to define this lift, we just need to define it on A and on P. So defining it on A, we just need to take F, right? It's already defined on A. And to define it on P, we just do two things. We show that, well, first of all, there exists, by definition, of a co-kernel and the fact that this square commute, there exists some map like this of chain complexes that we can call, how can we call it? Oh, well, you can just composite G with sigma, right? If you want. It will be a map of R modules. Right? This is a G sigma, but this is not really a chain map. This is just a map of R modules. And so now we are in the setting in which we can use the fact that this is projective, right? We have a map from P into Y and a surjection into Y, so we can lift it to X. The problem with this approach is that if we do this, you may have seen things like this in the homology course, of course. But the problem with this approach is that it's not necessarily compatible with the differential. And so we have to work more to have something compatible with the differential. So this is what we are going to do now. All right. And we are going to do it by induction. And this is where you start to see the fact that we work with bounded chain complexes appear. Because if our chain complexes do not start at 0, then we have a problem here. We cannot start anywhere, so things get more difficult. So let us build L by induction. All right, so to build, so let's call it LK. So to build it for k equals 0, we don't need to do anything special because we don't really care about the differential, right? We have, we don't have anything degree -1, so there is nothing to check. So we just do what I said. We have I0 here, we have P0, we have G0, Y0, X0, P0. This is an injection. This is a surjection by the lemma I did right here. All right, so there exists a section sigma 0 of R modules, right? Nothing to do with the differential. And so we have something like this, sigma 0, B0, G0, Y0, P0, X0. And so because P is projective, there exists some, let's call it not L because I want M, I don't care. There exists some M0 like this, and then define L0 from B0 to X0 as, B0 is isomorphic to A0 plus P0, and you just use F0 and M0 to go into X0, right? And you check that this commutes, like the lift like this, commutes with both things. Like here, if you have the inclusion, then on the inclusion, it is defined by F0, so it commutes. And if you project, well, by definition, it commutes. All right, because well, on this one, it commutes because this square commutes, and on this one, it commutes because this triangle commutes. Okay? Is this good for everyone? You have probably seen similar thing in the homology course, but just to remind you how it works, and maybe you didn't state it precisely like this, I'm doing it again. All right, so now we do the induction step. So this one is more tricky. Right, so assume we have built Lj from Bj into Xj for all j up to k, such that, well, first of all, dLj is Lj minus 1d, and Pjlj is Gj, and Ljlj is Ljij, sorry, is Fj. All right, so basically we have built lifts up to degree k minus 1. All right, and we want to build the lift for degree k. So just like for k equals 0, we can find some lift L tilde k from bk into xk, such that L tilde k is, so pk L tilde k is gk, and L tilde k ik is fk. But maybe dlk tilde is different from lkd. Right? We can find a lift, but we haven't talked about the differential yet. So we now do some diagram chase, and when we are finished, we come up with this thing. We look at this map, these two maps. They are different, so we consider their difference, right? We let xi be some map from dl tilde k, sorry, it's equal to dl tilde k minus lk minus 1d. It's a map, sorry, from bk to xk minus 1. All right, and we want to modify L tilde such that it still satisfies these properties, and this is 0, right? And if we can do this for all k, we are finished. All right, so we have a few properties. First of all, d circle psi is 0. Why? Because d circle d is 0, and lk minus 1 commutes with d, so we can put the d here on the other side, and we still have d circle d equals 0. Similarly, we have psi circle d equals 0, but we don't really care about that. Also, pk minus 1 circle psi equals 0. So why? Because p psi, so let me drop indices. This is p d l tilde. Let me keep this one maybe, minus p l d. But p commutes with d, so this becomes d p l tilde minus p l d, and d commutes with l and p, so we can. All right, so we get so p l tilde is g, so we get dg, and here we get gd, and because g is the chain map, this is 0. And similarly, psi circle ik minus 1 is equal to 0. All right, so our map psi is very nice, right? It vanishes on the image of I, and it actually defines a map into the co-kernel of P. Oh, sorry, a map into the kernel of P. All right, therefore, psi defines a map that I'm going to, so just to make sure I don't get things wrong, psi prime, which goes from bk mod ik of a k into the kernel K, and actually it goes into the cycles of the kernels. All right? By definition, this is Pk. Okay, so let me say it again. Because of this, psi lands in the kernel of the differentials of the cycles. Because of this, it lands actually in the kernel of P, which is K, by my notation. And because of this, it defines a map on the quotient, which is P. All right? Okay, so we are almost done. But yes?
You also what C circle D is 0, but I don't know whether it's useful or not, but I don't know why is it true.
Yeah, I think it's not so useful, and actually it's not even true, so maybe I should remove it. Yeah, it's not useful, and yeah, I don't know where I wrote this. Anyway. All right, so we are in a setting like this where we have a map from a projective complex into something. And we have to think about our hypothesis is that P is a acyclic cofibration, so it's a quasi-isomorphism. And so if you take the long exact sequence of this short exact sequence, then you see that this K here is acyclic itself. Its homology vanishes. All right. So K is acyclic. Therefore, G from K into Zk minus 1 K is surjective. Right? Any cycle is a boundary. So therefore, we have a diagram like this, psi prime, Zk minus 1 K, Kk. And this is the differential. All right, so this is projective, so we can lift. So we have a lift which is called Xi-sigant. Right, very imaginative. All right, and then you can compose it with the inclusion into xk. So we get Xi third from Pk into xk. All right, and then we can define Lk as L tilde k minus Xi third. All right, our lift here, sorry, I went too far, or not far enough. Our lift here is defined as our previous lift minus this thing here, which is here to correct the fact that this is not 0. All right, and as an exercise, you can check that this Lk, well, it still defines, how to say, it still defines a lift in the sense that the square with the lift commutes, right? So this thing, these two triangles commute. And moreover, because we have fixed the issue with the differential, right? The issue was this map Xi, which was the problem with the differential. We have lifted, and used the fact that this is surjective. And now you can check that GLK is actually equals to LK minus 1D. All right. And so we are done. Okay, so is this proof okay for everyone? As you can see now, it gets well, more technical, and we use very much what our category is, right? It's not abstract nonsense anymore. It's an actual concrete statement about chain complexes. And you are going to see that the next statement, so the overlifting property, also uses a lot what chain complexes are. Okay, so no questions about this proof? No? All right. So let me now do the over lifting statement. Then we can have a break and then go on with functorial factorization. So next lemma, CH satisfies MC42, which is the fact that acyclic cofibrations lift against fibrations. All right. So the proof is a bit more elaborate. It's not so much diagram chasing than well, we are going to see. Basically, we are going to give a nice description of the co-kernel of an acyclic cofibration. All right. So as you recall, maybe I defined it in a previous lecture. I'm not sure anymore, but anyway, let A be an R module, and for n at least one, we define the n of A, which is a chain complex by, well, I'm going to write it like this. You have 0 everywhere except in degree n and in degree -1. All right, and then you have 0 everywhere. Okay, I guess I defined it at some point. You can view it if you want as a reduced reduced cell complex of disk, right? Hence the notation. Anyway, it's acyclic, obviously. And it satisfies a nice property, which is the fact that the functor that maps a chain complex to its degree n component is representable by this object. All right, so the homomorphisms, so chain maps between Dn, A, and some chain complex C's, C, are isomorphic to hom in R between A and Cn. And this lemma is completely obvious. I'm going to prove it. Essentially, if you have a map like this, you just see what it does on degree n. And because you have this thing here, whatever it sends in degree n, you send this to the differential, right? Whenever you have, all right, so this is n and -1. Whenever you have some map like this, well, what you want to do here, oh, sorry, there is a shift in degrees, this is Cn -1. Whenever you have a map here between A and Cn -1, to define a map from Dn into C star, you just, well, you take, what am I saying? No, this was the overall. I was right the first time. If you have some map from A to Cn and you want to define it into Cn -1, all right, let's say this is F, you just take D circle F, right, and this computes. Because this is the identity and this is D. All right. So as a corollary, why am I writing this? If A is projective, then we have the fact that Dn of A, which is a chain complex, is projective in some sense. So if M star into N star is projective in degree n, then any chain map Dn of A into N star lifts M star, which is to say that whenever you have something like this, and this...
C'est surjectif, non?
Well, yeah, it's surjective, not projective. Voilà, surjective in English. So whenever you have something like this, and this is surjective in degree n, then you can lift like this, all right? So if basically says that Gn of A is projective in the category of chain complexes for some definition of projective. All right. And now we get to the core of the proof. Let I from A to B be an acyclic cofibration. So where, okay, these are chain complexes. And so this is an injective map, which is an iso in homology. Then we have two statements, and we let P be the co-kernel of I. Pk is projective for all k. Okay, this is sorry. The cycles of P are projective for all k. And moreover, P star, the chain complex, is isomorphic in the category of chain complexes to this direct sum. All right. So this tells you that the co-kernel of an acyclic cofibration has this very specific form. All right. So if you want to look at this co-kernel, how to understand it. So let's start with degree 0. In degree 0, we just have the things coming from D0, which is Z1P. And then you have Z1P, and this is the identity. Then here you have Z2P, and here you have Z2P. And then you have Z3P, and here you have Z3P. So this is degree 1, 2, 3. And so P is isomorphic in degree 0 to Z1P, in degree 1 to the direct sum of these two, in degree 2 to the direct sum of these two, and so on. So basically, the statement tells you that P is acyclic because it's the co-kernel of a quasi-iso. And you have a preferred supplement, complement in English, I guess, of the cycles, right? You have the cycles. So for example, here you have the cycles in degree 1. Oh. I guess there is some kind of mistake. This should be 0, 0, 1, 1, 2, 2. All right, so you have the cycles in degree 1. So they get sent to 0 here. Then you have a preferred complement in terms of R modules that is moreover sent by the identity into the, or precisely an isomorphism, into the cycles of the previous rank, right? So in addition to knowing that this is acyclic, you can split the chain complex in each degree and have this, this very nice shape, right? Is this okay for everyone, this statement, what it means? All right, so the proof is it's not so bad. Let us define a subcomplex P upper K, so subcomplex, as follows. So I will check my notes to make sure that I don't write nonsense. If n is at least k, then this is Pn. If n is lower than k minus 2, then this is 0. And here, to have a chain complex, you have to take the boundary. So you have something like this, right? And this is obviously a chain complex, a sub-complex of P. All right. So since P is acyclic, what is pk mod pk plus 1? All right. So the statement is that pk contains pk plus 1. You can see it here. It's obvious, right? This becomes smaller and smaller as k grows. So since P is acyclic, pk over pk minus 1 is isomorphic to dk of zk minus 1 P. So let me show you why. So what is pk mod pk plus 1 in degree n? You have 3 cases. If n is at least k plus 1, then you have the same definition here. It's Pn and Pn, so this is 0. If n is lower than k minus 2, then similarly, you have 0 mod by 0, so this is 0. So you have 3 cases left. You have n equals k plus, oh, all right, let me be sure. N equals k minus 1. And I guess that's it, actually. So for n equals k, the larger one is equal to Pn, and the smaller one is equal to Bn minus 1. So this is Pn mod Bn minus 1. All right, but P is acyclic. So when you mod out by the boundary, what you get is isomorphic to the cycles. And similarly, what do you get in degree n? Sorry, this is a k. K, this is k. And when n equals k minus 1, well, you get bk minus 1 mod 0, because this is 0 in this degree. So you get bk minus 1. But again, because this is acyclic, this is zk minus 1. Oh, sorry, this is also zk minus 1. Well, you have to check the indices. This is a bit complicated. And anyway, the induced map between the two is the identity. All right, so you get this disk here. All right. So then you get a short exact sequence like this: 0, pk minus pk plus 1, pk, and pk mod pk plus 1, 0. All right, but this is dk of zk minus 1p. And so it satisfies the property of before, right? It is a projective in the category of chain complexes in a nice way. So therefore, you can use your intuition about projective modules to see, it's not really an intuition, like you can reuse the same actual proof to see that there exists a section like this, and that therefore pk is isomorphic as a chain complex, right? Not just as modules, to pk plus 1, direct sum in the category of chain complexes to dk of zk minus 1 of p. All right? You do the exact same proof as you did for R modules, but for chain complexes. If you have a short exact sequence of R modules and the last one is projective, then you can find the section and therefore prove that the middle term is isomorphic in some nice way to the direct sum of the two other terms. This translates completely identically to the category of chain complexes. Exact same proof. You just need to use this statement here. All right, so you can view it as an exercise. And so now we are almost done because P is equal to, by definition, P1. So this is isomorphic to P2 plus D1 of D0 of P, which is itself isomorphic to P3 plus D2 of Z1 of P plus D1 of D0 of P, and so on. It continues like this. And now, how to see that you get to what you wanted? Well, the thing is that these complexes, when you take the limit as n goes to infinity, you get nothing, because every time you increase a step, they start to vanish in higher and higher degrees. So in the end, using some kind of induction, you get this. All right. Like if you want to prove that this is an isomorphism, what you need to do is to prove it in each degree. And when you have a fixed degree, well, you can run through this thing a finite number of times and then see that in this degree, it will be isomorphic to this. Because let's say you want to prove that this is isomorphic to this in degree n, and you get to Pn plus 1 plus blah, blah, blah. And Pn plus 1 vanishes in degree up to n. So there is nothing to consider here. Right? Is this good enough for everyone? All right. So I promised a break. Let me just finish the proof. I promise when we have a 5-minute break. So end of proof of MC4 2. We just use what we saw right now. Let's say that we have an acyclic cofibration here. And here we have a fibration, X, Y. So now we take the co-kernel, which is P. And by what we just proved, this is isomorphic to the direct sum of dk of zk minus 1p. All right, for k less 1. And so what you get, let me take a little more space. What you get is here a short exact sequence, as before, in which the target, so this is a direct sum of disks. And as we saw, disks are kind of projective in chain complexes. And so the direct sum is also projective. And so you can find a section here, which is a section of chain complexes and not just R modules, right? I will let you write down the details. And so this proves that as chain complexes, B star is isomorphic to A star plus P star. Right? And then to define the lift L, you just take F plus any lift of G circle star, sigma, where a lift is again a lift of chain complexes obtained using this lifting property of disks. Right? This is not just a lift of R modules. This is a lift of chain of this is a chain map. All right, and so then you get this lift. Okay, so I did the proof like this so that you can have small, nice lemmas. If you wanted, you could do the whole proof by some kind of diagram chase, but prefer to do it this way for, well, I guess it shows the core of the proof more clearly. All right, so any questions about these proofs before the break? Is this okay for everyone? All right, so we can have a 5 minutes break. After...
Juste une question.
Oui, yes.
C'est pourquoi, elle vient d'où la projectivité des ZK? des cycles. De la preuve du...
Ah oui, c'est vrai que je ne l'ai pas démontré. All right, so the question is, why are the zk projective? Oh, faut pas que je fasse de bêtises. So zkp is projective. Let us try to do it. So whenever you have a map like this, so this is a chain, a map of our modules. Yeah, sorry. This is you don't even have to do this. This is because using the split, we have pk is isomorphic to zk -1, I guess, plus something, all right? And so this is projective. And so if you recall, there are several definitions of projective modules. And one of them is that it's a direct summand of the three modules. So there exists some Rn, which is equal to P plus something, all right? And so this is equal to zk -1 plus something plus something. All right, therefore, zk -1 is a direct summand of some free R module, which is one of the definitions of a projective module. So if you want to define the lift, then you just take a basis here, you define the lift on each element of the basis, and then you restrict to zk -1. All right? This,
Ouais,
okay?
c'est bon, merci beaucoup.
Yeah. All right, so let's have a 5-minute break, and then we can start proving MC. All right, so we just proved the axioms MC 1, 2, 3, and 4 for chain complexes. So as you can see, 1, 2, 3 are pretty much okay. Maybe 3 is a little bit more complicated than the other two, but still pretty much abstract nonsense. Axiom 4 starts to become more complicated, and we really need to get into our category. Like, it's not just some general statement, it's really something about chain complexes. Axiom MC5 starts to become a lot more complicated. So this is going to take, I guess, until the end of the lecture, of the session. So let me recall you that it means that whenever we have a morphism like this, we can factor it either as a cofibration followed by an acyclic fibration, or an acyclic cofibration followed by a fibration. All right? In a functorial way. So the way we are going to do it is through some kind of technique, which is a very general technique. Well, it's general in some way, like you have to satisfy a set of conditions. And once these conditions are satisfied, everything comes automatically, but you have to check the conditions. And to check the conditions, you have to really work on your category. And this technique is called the small object argument. All right. So let me explain, roughly speaking, how this goes. So the basic idea is that, well, for example, let's say we want to factor the map as a cofibration followed by an acyclic fibration. So what is a cofibration? You can think about your topological intuition. Cofibration is kind of like a CW complex. And the CW complex is built using cells. So we will have some kind of set of basic cofibrations. So for topological spaces, it will be spheres included in disks, right? And something will be a cofibration if it can be obtained from some space by gluing a cell, right? So this is how cofibrations are built. So in order to provide this factorization, we are going to start from our space A and glue a lot of cells to it until we can find an acyclic fibration on 2x. Right? But now the question is, how do we get this acyclic vibration? Well, what is an acyclic vibration? Either we have the basic definition, like, for example, a surjection in each degree or something like this. Or we can define it using a lifting property. And this is actually what we are going to do. We are going to define vibrations, or like in this case, acyclic vibrations are as things that have right lifting property with respect to cofibrations. And so we are going to provide a set of basic cells. They will likely be called generating cofibrations that have two properties. We can build any cofibrations out of them, and therefore vibrations, or actually acyclic vibrations, will be defined as things that have right lifting property with respect to these basic generating cofibrations. We don't have to check them for all cofibrations. And so this is going to be part of a small object argument. All right. So I hope it will be clearer when we start going through the argument. And so now, how does the small object argument work? So let's say that you want to you have one of these generating cofibrations. So for example, you can imagine this is the inclusion of some sphere into the disk, right? The boundary of a disk into a sphere. And you have some space X, right? And it goes to some space Y. And you want to do two things. You want to do one thing, but which is composed of two things. You want to factor. So I guess this should have been Y and this should have been X for the sake of the argument. You want to factor it through some X prime such that two things happen. First of all, this map is built by a push out by an acyclic cofibration. And this map has the right lifting property with respect to all generating cofibration. Well, if I present it this way, it becomes obvious that one of the things you can do is simply to define X prime as a push out of X and B along A, right? This would be like you take X, you glue a disk along A, right, along a sphere. But the problem is that you don't know how to glue, like you want this here to have the right lifting property whenever you have a sphere mapping into X, right? You have not chosen a specific sphere. So you do it, you do a direct sum, or sorry, a coproduct over all possible ways of mapping A into X, right? Whenever you have a way of mapping a sphere into X, you add a disk along this sphere. So this will be something enormous. You start from a space. Let's say we are in dimension 2, and you look for all circles embedded in your space. And whenever you have a circle like this, you glue a disk. Right? So this is something huge, right? A very large space. But if you do this, you take the coproduct, then you get something like this. Whenever you have a diagram like this, for all diagram, so whenever you have a diagram like this, it's part of one way of mapping a sphere into X. And so it's part of this coproduct. And so by the universal property of coproduct, there exists some map like this. Right? You just take this map and you compose it along this inclusion. Like this B is included in this coproduct in some way, and this will commute by definition of the coproduct. And so you have almost what you wanted, because you have almost managed to lift your map to X. You have not lifted it to X, you have lifted it to X prime. So now you continue. You say, okay, now I want to lift all map like this. Right? I still have this, no, sorry, this is like this. I still have this lifting problem here. Why you do it again? Now you have your space X prime. It's enormous, but you continue to glue cells to it. You glue new cells. You glue cells in all possible ways of gluing cells to it so that this diagram commutes. You define the coproduct X second as before, and you continue. You get X second. So instead of primes and second, I will call them X1, X2, because it's going to get not unwieldy after some time. And so now you have lifted a little bit more your problem. You have continued to lift. But you want to continue to lift. Right, so you want again to lift to X, which you have not done yet. So you do it again. You take your space X2, you look at all ways of mapping a sphere into X2 such that you have some commuting diagram, and you continue. And so in the end, you get something like this. You have X0, X1, X2. I guess the indices are wrong here at some points, but anyway. X3 and so on. All right, this is X1, 2, 3, 4. And in the end, it goes into X. Ah, sorry. I'm putting it in the wrong way. Apologies. You have some X, then you have X1, X2. Yeah, there is some issue with indices, but anyway, this is the end result. So it goes into Y. And whenever you have a map that factors from one of the X1, for example, if it factors through Xn, then you can lift it to Xn plus 1, right? So now the trick you use is the fact that the sphere is some kind of, in some sense, small. Whenever you have a map from a sphere to some X, which will be a colimit of Xn, because the sphere is a compact CW complex, is finite CW complex, by a cellular approximation, this will land in a finite subcomplex of your colimit. So it will land in one of the Xn. And so you will be able to lift it to Xn plus 1. And in the end, lift it to X. All right. So I guess this is a very brief way of motivating all this, but now I'm going to present the argument in a more formal way. But this will be the idea. Essentially, you look at all ways of mapping spheres into your space in a way that it commutes. You take the coproduct, and then you can, by definition, lift to the coproduct. And then you do it again and again and again. And then you have a very, very huge complex. But now, when you look at this huge complex, you do it an infinite number of times. Whenever you map a sphere into this huge complex, you land in some finite subcomplex of this huge complex. And so you are in the setting in which you are like this. And so you can lift for this thing. All right, so let me do it in a more formal way now. All right, so let C be category and M. So let me take the same notation as in my notes from Fi be a set of morphisms. All right. So the goal, as I said, is whenever you have some X into Y, you want to factor it as some X prime like this, where this is built by push outs along maps from M. And this has the right lifting property as mapped from M. Right? So what we did before, we are going to take a lot of coproducts in order to do this. All right. So we define the following set. S of MP is going to be the set of all triples I, G, and H, where I is in I, G goes from AI to X, H goes from BI to Y, such that the following diagram commutes like this. Sorry, this is G, this is H, this is Fi, and this is P. So for P from X to Y. So our goal is to factor this P into something like this, where this is built by gluing cells, and this has the right lifting property that we want. So essentially, we take this huge set of all ways of mapping. You can think about it like spheres inside X, such that when we glue a disk, we can go into Y. All right? And from this, we define G1 of MP as the following push out. We take the push out against along all IGH in SM of P of AI going to X. So we take the coproduct of all the map GI. Here you do the same thing. All right, so let me explain what I just wrote. So you have your map P, and you look at all ways of mapping, let's say, a sphere into X, so that when you can extend the disk into Y. All right, and you would want to be able to lift this thing here, but in general you cannot. So what you do is you glue a bunch of disks in all possible ways of having a sphere mapping into X, so that you can extend the disk into Y. And you call this the coproduct G1 of MP. All right, so this is something enormous, right? You glue a lot of disks in all possible ways, in all the ways in which you would need to be able to lift to X here. All right? But now, by definition of a coproduct, so you call this one, sorry, I1. By definition of a coproduct, you have F, which goes here, and here you have a coproduct of all the H for I, G, H in S, M, P. Right? By definition, this outer square commutes, because you have to check that it commutes, so you have to check it on each of the I, and by definition, SMP is composed of all the commutating squares. So this outer square commutes. And so by definition of a coproduct, there exists some P1 like this. Right? So is this construction of G1 of MP clear? Right? Are there some questions so far? Oh, right. Yeah, sorry, I called it P, not F. Right, these are the Fi. All right, so we have managed to factor P as something which is built by a push out of maps from M. All right, so if we think about it, M will be some set of cofibrations, and cofibrations are closed under push out, so this will be a cofibration. And then we want to check that P1 has some lifting property. Right? So the lifting property it has is that whenever we have So let me write it. The map G1 P into Y, so this P1 has a kind of lifting property, right? Whenever you have a commuting square like this, this square is part of SMP, right? So therefore, it defines an element of the coproduct here. And therefore, by the universal, not even the universal property of a Peugeot, but using these maps, let's call it, I don't know, GH, JK, bon, K, allez, hop. There exists some Ki like this. Right? Ah, no. So someone is asking me in the chat, does C need to be small? Not necessarily. It has to be locally small. But here you need to have a set, and I wanted to emphasize this later, but let's do it now. Here you need to have a set of morphisms. M cannot be all the sets of your category because this will be too large. And similarly, it cannot be the set of all cofibrations because this will be too large again. You really need to have a small set of things that will be called, for example, generating cofibrations. Something which is small and which is which generates all cofibrations in a way that we are going to define. And only then can you define this push out or this coproduct really. Because this is composed of sets, right? This one here is a set because it is a subset. This is a subset of M, or M and I are the same thing, right? So this is a subset of I cross hom of, so the product over all I of hom of AI X cross the product over all I of hom of BI Y, right? This is a set, this is a set, this is a set, their product is a set, this is a subset, so it is a set, right? Right, but you are right. This is an important point, and I haven't talked much about set theoretical issues so far, but this is one point where this is very important because when we want to do this this coproduct, basically, we need to make sure that we have a set. Otherwise, we get something too large and something that doesn't really exist in our category. Right? So when we get to this G1, we have a kind of lifting property. Right? Whenever we have a map square like this, we can lift a map, but not to X, we can only lift it to G1. All right, so we have a new problem now. We need to be able to lift from G1 into X, but we cannot always do it. So we repeat the construction. So here we have I1, and here we have P1. So we iterate the construction. So we define gk of MP as gk minus 1 of M pk minus 1. So this means that we have something that looks like this. So the thing I drew earlier, we have G1 of MP, which is, you can say it's P0, right? Then you have, it goes by I2 into G2 of MP, then G3 of MP, and so on. And it ends up going into Y. Oh, I should say, I will put the Y on below. Y. So this is P, this is P1, P2, P3, and so on. All right, and here each time we have the identity. So you start from your space X, you glue a bunch of cells. You can think about it this way. Every time you have a sphere that maps it to X and that can be extended to the disk to Y, then you glue a disk to X in order, well, now you can extend the map into this thing here, the disk into this. Right? But then you do it again, because now you can have some sphere here that extend to a disk in Y, but not here. So you glue a new disk to this sphere, and then you have G2. But now you have the same problem. Maybe you have a sphere here that extends to Y, to a disk, but not in G2. So you glue another disk to G2 here, and then the sphere extends, but maybe you have still a problem. And, you see what I mean? And you define G infinity of MP to be the colimit for n in n of the Gn of MP. Right? And we get a factorization. X goes into the colimit. All right. For example, it goes into G1, which goes into the colimit. Sorry, I called it G infinity by some map called I infinity. And now you have this diagram tells you that there exists a map from the colimit into Y, right? That we call P infinity, which on the GK part of the colimit is defined by PK. All right. And so now we want to prove that, well, this is built using, you only do push out along maps from M, and by hypothesis, these were cofibrations, so this will still be a cofibration because it's a push out of cofibrations, right? We only, for example, glue the disks to spheres, and these are always cofibrations. So now what we want to do is to prove that this map is an acyclic fibration, for example. And as I said, to prove that it is an acyclic fibration, we prove that it has some lifting property with respect to maps from M, right? Because we said at the beginning, our assumption will be that M will generate all cofibrations in some nice way. All right? But the problem is that we still have some issue. Whenever we have a map from AI into G infinity of MP, we want to be able to lift like this. And we could say, okay, we continue to do the same thing. We again glue disks whenever we have a sphere that extends to Y, and we do it again and again. But the problem, we have to stop at some point. Otherwise, we have a colimit over, well, it has to stop at some point. And this is where we have the fact that we have a small object. As I said at the beginning, we have a sphere here, for example. And the sphere, whenever you have a sphere into some huge colimit like this, because the sphere is a finite CW complex, you can always factor it through some GK here. All right, there will exist a factorization like this. Because the sphere is small. So it lands in some finite stage of the colimit. It cannot land into like all the spheres you have glued at once because it's compact. So it can only meet a finite number of open sets, right? But now you are in business because now you have GK plus 1 of MP. And you have this map into Y. So you have a diagram as before. AI goes into GK, goes into Y, goes into BI. And here you have a push out, GK plus 1. And by definition, there exists some kind of, not really a lift, but the inclusion of BI into GK plus 1. So there exists some map from BI into GK plus 1 that makes the whole thing commute. And now to define the lift onto G infinity, you just include it into GK plus 1 into G infinity. All right. So this is roughly speaking the idea. We start from our space. We glue a sphere in all possible ways in order to lift all map from X to the X plus 1, right? But maybe now we have spheres that are not included in X that still extend to Y. So we glue spheres again and again and again and again. And we do the limit as n goes to infinity. But now whenever we have a sphere that goes into the colimit, it goes into some finite stage. And by definition, this lifts to the next stage and therefore to the final stage, right? But for this, we need to have some smallness property of AI. And this is where the name small object argument comes from. All right, so let me give just a definition. An object A in C is called n small. So if I don't say that it is something small, it will be n small. You have another definition of small for where this is any ordinal number. If you don't know what an ordinal is, don't worry. I won't talk about it again. If for all diagrams X from N into C, there is a bijection. Well, the canonical map is a bijection, rather. Right, you have a map. Sorry, canonical map goes this way. You have a colimit over all n and you have a hom A into a colimit. So how is this map defined? Well, whenever this is the union of all the ways of mapping A into some of the xn, and you identify whenever you have xn included in the xn plus 1, you can always extend it to a map to the colimit, right? Well, the A is small if this map is a bijection. This means that whenever you have a map from A into the colimit, it comes from a map into some of the xn. For example, in top, finite CW complexes are small. Right? Whenever you have a finite CW complex and you have a map into some huge colimit, then it comes from a map into some finite stage of a colimit. In CHR, small objects are finite chain complexes. So by this I mean Cn equals 0 except for a finite number of n, such that Cn is a finitely presented R module for all n, right? So for example, Dn of R is small, the Dn that I defined earlier, right? N minus 1. Another example is Sn minus 1 of R, where you take 0 everywhere, except in degree n minus 1. Right, and I'm going to use this. So now to the proposition. So let's recall that we have this set M of morphisms, and we have this set SMP and so on, and we define G infinity by successive gluings. All right, so if all the AI are small, then P infinity has the right lifting property with respect to M. And the proof is what I wrote down a little bit earlier. Whenever you have a diagram like this, because AI is small, these factors, by definition, through one of the components, so some GK, like this. All right, this is the definition of being small. Whenever you have a map into an infinite colimit, you can factor it through a finite stage of a colimit. There is a question, should we understand omega when I write n? Yes, n is the ordinal, the first infinite ordinal. Right, n is the category. You have 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. Right, you can view it as a partially ordered set. And in this case, it will be the first uncountable ordinal, which is so I have 0 if you want. Anyway, but this is really just a notation, right? All right. So let me go back to the arguments. So we have some commuting square like this. This map here factors through some finite stage. And so because of the definition of a push out, there exists something here which makes the whole thing commute here and here. All right. So there exists some lift Lk plus 1. And therefore, there exists a lift L, which is simply Lk plus 1 composed with the inclusion. Well, I say inclusion, maybe it's not injective, but the canonical map from a component of a colimit into the colimit. All right. So this is, roughly speaking, the idea. You start from your space X, you glue cells in all possible ways, an infinite number of times, such that whenever you have a map into some stage, you can lift to the next stage. And now whenever you have a map into the colimit, because the source is small, it factors through some finite stage, and therefore you can lift it to the next stage and then include it into the final stage. All right, is this, are there some questions about that? So I'm going to write this down as an actual proper theorem because I will reuse it a few times. Oh, okay, actually the theorem is in the notes. You can go look there because I don't have so much time left. But just to recall, we need a set homomorphisms. We need a co-complete category, of course, because otherwise we cannot do colimits. And we need to assume that the source of all the morphisms in the set are small, right? Then we can factor any map as a map. Whenever we have a map from X to Y, we can factor any map into a map which is built by push out. And this one has the right lifting property with respect to M. And this is built by push outs along morphisms of M, right? So this is what we just proved. Right? I know it was probably a bit fast, but essentially this is what we did. So now we want to apply this to chain complexes. To apply this to chain complexes, we will have the following classes of maps. We will let, so you recall we had this chain complex where you have R in degree n and n-1. I also define D0 of R is simply 0 everywhere except in degree 0. Sn of R is just 0 everywhere except in degree n. And I also define for just notational reasons, S-1 of R is 0. Right? So there exists a cofibration In from Sn of R into Dn of R, which is a cofibration. It's the obvious inclusion, right? Just include this R into this R, and this is a chain map. And there exists an acyclic cofibration like this. And I denote by I the set of all In for n at least 0, and J the set of all Jn for n at least 0. And so now to finish the proof of the theorem, I just prove the following lemma. I write the following lemma and you are going to prove it. So in CH at least 0 of R, fibrations are maps which have the right lifting property with respect to J, and acyclic fibrations are maps which have the right lifting property with respect to I. So by this I mean a map is a fibration if and only if it has the right lifting property with respect to all elements of J. And you can check it very easily, because what does it mean to have the right lifting property with respect to elements of J? Well, if you recall, a map like this is completely determined by the image in degree n, so by a map from R into Yn. But this is a map of R module, so this is determined actually just by the image of 1, the element of the ring 1. So this is simply determined by an element of Yn. And a lift would be determined by an element of Xn. So to say that we have a lift every time we have a map like this is to say that we have a lift of every element like this, which is another way of saying that this map is surjective, right? And you have a similar statement here. It's a tiny bit more complicated because you have to check at the same time that the map is acyclic and injective, right? It's not so hard. It's just a small diagram chase. Basically, you take any cycle in the target and you lift it to a cycle in the source, and you show that anything which is a boundary in the target gets sent to a boundary in the boundary in the source gets sent to a boundary in the target. All right, this is just a tiny diagram chase that I will let you do. And as a corollary, CH greater than 0 satisfies MC5. And the proof now uses this machinery that we just described. All right, so for example, let's prove that any morphism factors as a cofibration followed by an acyclic fibration. Well, take so any morphism, let's say F from X to Y. Well, you just consider X goes into G infinity. What class do you take? You take the class of generating cofibration I. And here P infinity goes into Y. Then I infinity is built by push outs along elements of I, which are cofibrations. And cofibrations are closed under push outs. So I infinity is itself a push out. And P infinity has the right lifting property with respect to I. So it is an acyclic fibration, sorry, by the previous lemma. And similarly, x to g infinity of j f into y is a factorization as an acyclic cofibration followed by a fibration. All right. So I'm out of time. Well, I'm already actually over time. So sorry about that. So just next time we will just finish. So the proof of the theorem is complete now. We have proved all the axioms, MC1 to 5. As you can see, the last one is the hardest one, I guess. Next time we are just going to present a theorem which bundles up this whole argument in one neat container, right? Which is called the theorem of the existence of cofibrantly generated model structure. Essentially, it means that we have some model structures which are generated by some classes of cofibrations and acyclic cofibrations, like here. As I mentioned before, there is not, well, there is an analog for fibrantly generated model structure, but it's much more rare because it's rare for something to be co-small. And as you saw, it was essential for us to have small objects, and co-small objects don't really exist. I mean, they exist, but there are not many in chain complexes, for example. So we are just going to focus on cofibrations, right? So any questions about all this before we end the session? I guess it was a little bit fast at the end, but in the notes, it's everything is written down properly. All right, so if there are no questions, I will just stop the recording.